Ryzen 3950X, 16 cores, 32 threads, meet the mainstream Class AM4 CPU that demolished Intel's high-end desktop processors this generation. And now you can run it in a laptop, a 15-inch laptop no less, the XMG Apex 15, a machine that lays claim to being the most powerful notebook ever made. And to be clear, this is using an actual desktop Ryzen 3950X, an off-the-shelf consumer processor that's inside the laptop. But let's get one thing out of the way straight off the bat. This thing is monstrous and the performance is mind-bending. Yeah, on the face of it, this whole thing shouldn't work. Ryzen 9 3950X, it's got a 105 watt TDP, clocks up to a maximum of 4.7 gigahertz. Its base clock across all 32 threads, 3.5 gigahertz. To put this chip into this chassis without liquid cooling or something else similarly exotic sounds like a nightmare waiting to happen. Now, I'm not going to say this is a thin and light notebook with extreme battery life, because clearly it isn't. I'm not going to say it's cool and quiet either, because man, if you swap into performance mode, temperatures hit the 80s, occasionally the 90s, and the noise from the fans is extreme. Performance-wise, you won't get the same grunt from the chip that you get from putting it into a desktop unit. But in many scenarios, this 15-inch laptop will outperform a desktop system that's using a Ryzen 9 3900X, a desktop 3900X PC running with faster memory no less. This is, well, it's hilarious, amazing. So let's take a quick look at the core specs of the unit I was sent for review. So you see, there's a range of companies out there that buy in these kind of bare-bone laptop chassis and then customize them. The unit you're seeing here, you may well see it used elsewhere in boutique PC online stores, but as far as I understand, only XMG or Schenker has worked on the BIOS to allow for Ryzen 9 3950 support. So yeah, my review unit here has the 3950X, 16 gigs of 3200 MHz DDR4 and a Samsung 970 EVO Plus NVMe SSD. The 15.4-inch screen here is 1080p, operating at 144 Hz, and on the main board soldered there is a refreshed version of NVIDIA's mobile RTX 2070. And how that relates to the desktop part, we'll discuss in the fullness of time. Quick look at the machine itself in terms of form factor. You've got a unit here designed for upgradability based on the B450 AMD desktop chipset, and it's running desktop processors. So let's get the bad news out of the way first. It is a 15.4-inch machine, but it's also about 1 inch deep. It's a bit of a unit, shall we say. What I've done here is to stack up the Apex 15 against a Dell XPS 15, a thin and light champion, and the 14-inch Asus Zephyrus G14. Both of those use low-power laptop chips and have less capable GPUs. So what you gain in a thinner machine there, you lose in terms of raw power and flexibility. Let's take a look at the ports next. Having a slab-like form factor means that ports can be run around the whole machine, the left, the right, and the back. So let's look at them in turn. We'll take a look at the left side first then. Kensington lock, full Ethernet port, dual USB 3.2s, and somewhat bizarrely for a machine of this size, a micro SD port, not the full-size version I would have preferred. On the right-hand side then, we've got inputs and outputs for audio and another USB port. On the back, well, the thickness of the machine allows for some extra ports here, and they are full-size no less. There's the power input there, along with a USB Type-C, HDMI 2.0, and I guess quaint, but appreciated nonetheless, a mini DisplayPort output. And yes, you can run video out there from that USB Type-C. Keyboard, trackpad, all absolutely fine. I like the way the fingerprint reader is actually embedded into the trackpad in the top left-hand corner there. Overall build quality and materials, I'd say, are fairly average. This isn't a prestige all-metal unit. There's no carbon fiber or whatever. It's basic and honest in that respect. But this laptop, this chassis, starts at about €1,380 with a Ryzen 3 3300X and an RTX 2060. We've got some links in the video description below if you want to see the full thing. But it's a machine that's kind of designed to be scalable. And inside, there's a ton of scope for upgrading. But the exception to the rule here is the GPU. That's soldered in. The 2070 is a €158 upgrade over the 2060, and personally I'd recommend it. Anyway, flexibility, upgradability. Words typically not associated with a laptop, but here you get it in spades. And allow me to demonstrate how easy this machine is to upgrade. First of all, access to the innards of the unit, simply a matter of removing some screws on the bottom and pulling back the bottom of the case there. First thing you'll notice are the two fans and, well, this ginormous copper heatsink heat pipe combination. We'll get onto that in a minute, but check this out first. No soldered memory. We've got two CL22 crucial 3200 MHz DDR4 SODIMM modules here. There's no reason why you couldn't move on to 3600 MHz at some point in the future, a more natural fit for Ryzen processors. Then there's storage, and this is really impressive for a 15-inch notebook. Yes, we've got that nicely spec'd Samsung 970 EVO Plus NVMe drive here, but crucially there's a second slot for more storage. And over here, a nice big slot for adding a SATA drive, SSD, HDD, you decide. So it's like a desktop in that sense. Buy the unit, customize it, update it, upgrade it. It's all up to you. Now let's go back to that heatsink. Really easy to remove. The fan on the left there, remove its power and the two screws holding it in place. Then we have 6 numbered screws in the center there that keeps the heatsink and the heat pipes locked into place. Unscrew those, then, well, you simply remove it. XMG doesn't do things by halves here. The CPU and GPU have Thermal Grizzly Cryonaut thermal grease used as standard here. I removed that so we can get a better look at the components. But this is the star of the show. This is what you've been waiting to see. Ryzen 9 3950X. Clear evidence here that this is a standard AM4 socket and an off-the-shelf chip. 105 watt TDP here, totally unacceptable for a laptop. So XMG solution, pretty simple. Force it to run at 65 watt eco mode instead. And it's kept in that eco mode at all times. Now obviously there are a bunch of 65 watt Ryzen 3000 chips already out there that are a ton cheaper, and they are in XMG's configurator. Or just buy your own chip and slot it in. The chassis itself isn't super expensive after all. You could put a Ryzen 5 3600 in there, 3700X. Or you can push higher, and praise be to XMG for tossing this one into the package for me to test. A Ryzen 9 3900. This is an official 65 watt TDP OEM processor with 12 cores and 24 threads. Swapping CPUs over is as simple as it is on desktop. In fact, with the heatsink arrangement XMG uses and the instant accessibility, I actually think that opening up this PC and swapping processors over is actually a simpler task than doing it on an equivalent desktop. So I've hinted at what this thing can do, but thanks to Schenker XMG supplying 2 CPUs, I can show you both 3900 and 3950X performance. I can stack it up against desktop parts running in an optimal configuration. And yeah, you may recall that I was quite taken with Ryzen 4000, the Renoir APU. I'm also going to compare this beast to my findings from the Asus Zephyrus G14, a machine I rather like, to the point where I believe it's one of the best thin and light laptops I've ever used. Most of the tests here are going to be in the Apex 15's performance mode. You see, this machine comes with several profiles. There's power saving, quiet mode, entertainment and performance. The default is entertainment, but performance is where we're going to see the really big numbers and indeed the loudest fan noise. I ran Cinebench R20 on both 3900 and 3950X on all of these different performance modes, and scores vary significantly according to the chip and the mode. The numbers are rather dull, but will be included in the Eurogamer review I've put together, and there's a link to that in the video description. Let's just look at the 3950X here. Power saving isn't much fun to use, but quiet mode is perfectly fine for general non-intensive use, and it is indeed quiet. If we use performance mode as our baseline, in multi-core results on Cinebench, power saving only delivers 17% of full performance, rises to 26% for quiet mode and 61% for entertainment. But in single core results, things look better. 55% on power saving, 60% on quiet mode, 93% in entertainment. Bottom line, the quieter you make the machine, the more raw performance you lose as the software tweaks the power limit and temperature throttle points. So let's stick to performance mode and look at some numbers. In terms of single core performance, both 3900 and 3950X in the Apex 15, well, you can see a clear performance drop compared to the desktop parts. However, they do have the advantage over the Asus Zephyrus G14's Ryzen APU there, the Renoir chip. Multi-core, well again, Renoir is an 8-core 16-thread design with a much lower power budget. As we bring in the 12 and 16 cores from the Apex, we get a 55 to 79 point improvement in performance. Obviously though, compared to well-cooled desktop systems running with 3600 MHz DDR4 and full power budgets, the gap opens up. But regardless, the 3950X in laptop form delivers 81% of the full chip's performance, and it's 7% faster than a desktop 3900X. In this configuration, the 3900 non-X chip in the Apex 15 delivers 92% of the 3900X's desktop output. The fact that we got a gap this close is remarkable, bearing in mind the form factor and the heat and the power limitations of a 12-core processor running in a laptop. On to video encoding tests, where no CPU can hide from the crippling workload where all cores are maxed for an extended period of time. In H.264 4K video encoding using Handbrake, the laptop 3950X delivers 85% of the desktop version's output. 3900 is about the same in percentage terms, with 86% of the performance of the 3900X. As you can see, Renoir is left for dust here. HEVC encoding is an even more demanding task. 3900 in the Apex 15 still delivers 87% of the desktop chip's output, dropping to 80% when we stack up the 3950X in the laptop against desktop results. I do consider these results to be exemplary though. What's particularly interesting is that Renoir, AMD's Ryzen 4000 laptop APU, crumbles under extended load on all cores, throttling back performance massively and impacting that benchmark result. This laptop though just continues to power on through. Now, disadvantages: temperatures are in the 80s, the thermal assembly is super loud, but it's working, and it's working consistently. On to gaming next, and an entirely different challenge. You see, games utilize the CPU in very different ways to the brute force workloads that we've already demonstrated here. But first of all, we're going to take a quick look at the capabilities of the refreshed RTX 2070. I mean, there's not much to say here. The Crysis benchmark you're looking at now basically tells you everything you need to know. With a constricted power budget versus the desktop equivalent, frequencies on the mobile GPU throttle back, and the end result is that, rather uncannily, the mobile RTX 2070 is essentially point for point identical in performance terms to a desktop 2060, and obviously somewhat off the pace of a fully unleashed desktop 2070. This isn't a one-off either, as we segue seamlessly to Far Cry 5. Again, level pegging between mobile 2070 and desktop 2060 right down to the frame times there. Quite remarkable, bearing in mind the variation in hardware spec, particularly in terms of memory bandwidth. It does look like you can see some differentials in some workloads, however, as you can see here in The Witcher 3. Here, the mobile 2070 has a 5% lead across the bench over the desktop 2060. So yeah, maybe memory bandwidth does have something to say in some titles after all. CPU testing though, and here's where things get a little more interesting. So I'm benching here against our existing desktop data using Ryzen desktop chips paired with 3600 MHz DDR4. So this isn't apples to apples. The laptop has 3200 MHz RAM, remember. But it is perhaps more realistic. You see, if I spent so much money on the main processor for my desktop rig, I'd be sure to budget for CL16 3600 MHz DDR4, the sweet spot for Ryzen 3000. We did these tests with RTX 2080 Ti at 1080p on the desktop side to ensure we're CPU limited. To achieve similar results on laptop, on a different GPU, we benched at 720p instead to still ensure that we're CPU limited. Oh, and for some context on laptop performance, we've also got stats from the Asus Zephyrus G14. Ryzen 4000 again, 8 cores, 16 threads. A ton of fascinating data to dig into here, so let's get going. Ashes of the Singularity first. The CPU test delivers essentially identical results regardless of what GPU you might have in your system, unless you're using integrated graphics here, which we're not. This one soaks cores and threads, the closest we're going to get to a synthetic bench based on a game engine. Across the whole 3-minute sequence, the 3950X in the Apex 15 is only 3% faster than running the 3900. Compared against the desktop equivalents, both of them are delivering 89 to 90% of the performance of the desktop chip, but remember they are running with faster RAM, which gifts them a bit of extra juice. Bottom line though, parallel lines there pretty much, desktop versus laptop. Let's swap over to some other comparisons here where the differentials are more marked. The desktop Ryzen 5 3600X, the mainstream champion. It's basically right up there with the laptop 3950X. Ryzen 4000, which I should remind you is a pretty great laptop chip operating with just a 35-watt budget here. Well, the 3950X has a 5-point lead overall, which is halved with the 3900. However, this is a long benchmark and average frame rates flatter to deceive. The most intense sections in the test see Ryzen 4000 lag significantly, as you can see here. My guess here is that gaming's reliance on high frequencies is delivering better results from the 3600X, offset just a touch by the increase in our core count with the 3900 and 3950X. Move on to Crysis 3 now. Not quite as hardcore as Ashes in terms of multi-core utilization, but historically we've seen the game use extra clocks and extra cores to reasonable effect. The 3950X in the laptop only delivers a 2% lead over the 3900, and you're getting 90% of the desktop performance, and remember those chips are using faster RAM. Pretty good going, I'd say, and it's the same differential between 3900 in the laptop and the 3900X desktop. Now let's switch over to some other comparisons. 3950X in the Apex 15 toasts Ryzen 4000 in the Zephyrus G14 with a 33% performance advantage, dropping to 30% with the 3900. Now I do wonder whether different GPUs may be playing a part here in that result, but you'll note parallel lines on the graph, and you likely wouldn't see that if graphics were taking over as the primary limiting factor in the result. Then there's our mainstream champ, the Ryzen 5 3600X. Average frame rate across the benchmark is basically on par with the 3950X, but again, this average is deceiving. In the heaviest scenes, 3600X falls behind the many core processors in the laptop, but it's faster in lighter areas of the sequence. Average frame rate may be the same, but the laptop would provide the better experience overall. Let's address the theory that core count is being trumped by raw clocks by taking a look at Far Cry 5, a game that is driven mostly by one single thread. 3950X in the Apex 15 delivers 89% of the desktop parts performance, and this actually rises to 93% with the 3900 versus 3900X. This is actually closer than I imagined, but I guess that if most of the cores are underutilized, the power manager can refocus on fewer cores at faster clocks, similar to what we saw with our Cinebench single thread results. Let's flip over to our alternative comparison points. Ryzen 5 3600X is a touch faster than our laptop 3900, which in turn is a little bit faster than the 3950X. Yeah, Far Cry 5 is one of those games that actually sees degraded performance with very high core counts. That said, the Apex 15 with 3950X beats Zephyrus G14 Ryzen 4000 by 19%, and that's significant. Then again, so is form factor. The Zephyrus really is a lovely piece of kit and packs a ton of power for a 14-inch thin and light laptop. So, I think we now know everything we need to know about this piece of kit. It's a desktop PC with a notebook GPU crammed into a 15-inch laptop chassis. Graphics aside, you can upgrade it like a desktop. There's a ton of expandability in there, and if you really push the spec with high-end processors and memory, you essentially have an eminently portable workstation that outperforms the vast majority of the modern desktop PCs out there. In this sense, the value of the idea is just immense. I kind of love it. Downsides, you're running that silicon at very high temperatures. The noise in performance mode makes the PS4 Pro sound as though it's taken a vow of silence, while the performance and battery life of the machine unplugged is very, very poor. There's a 62 watt-hour battery in there, and realistically you're looking at an absolute maximum of 1 hour's worth of hobbled performance. But really, that's not what this machine is about. It's an actual desktop replacement. I guess you'd need to have a very specific series of CPU-heavy use case scenarios to justify this, because fundamentally for gaming, chances are a Comet Lake system with a 2080 Super mobile GPU would likely deliver better overall performance. But certainly from a digital Foundry perspective, the workloads we deal with in terms of video encoding, 4K editing and whatnot, this easily packs the most power in the smallest form factor that's appropriate for our needs when we're out on the road. And yeah, just basically having a proper B450 system that'll run the entire Ryzen 3000 line and conceivably the upcoming Zen 3 chips. Sort of mind-blowing to me. Icing on the cake, it's an RTX machine too, and here it is running Control with the full ray tracing feature set enabled. As it is essentially delivering RTX 2060 levels of performance, you do need to lean into DLSS to get great frame rates, but at reconstructed 1080p, your worst case scenario is 60 frames per second, and most of the time significantly above that. I guess one thing to bear in mind is that while performance is 2060 level, it is actually a 2070, meaning that you get 8 gigs of frame buffer memory, which is pretty much my only major criticism of the RTX 2060 addressed. But yeah, desktop class performance once again from a laptop, and that's pretty great. So there you are, a genuine exotic, unparalleled in CPU performance and a proper powerhouse. It's not without flaws, and the manufacturer itself admits that it's the first time they've tackled a project quite like this, using AMD Ryzen processors. I've had this unit for a while and I've been enjoying it. And I've also had time to see how the system has evolved with BIOS updates. Earlier coverage you may have seen would have been based on earlier BIOS revisions, and I kind of wanted to wait with this review until most of the bumps in the road had been ironed out. And I think by and large they have been. It's still a crazy piece of kit, but one that speaks to the diversity of hardware in the PC space. And at the most basic level, I just love the idea that someone out there in charge of significant manufacturing capability just said, yeah, I'm going to put a 16-core 32-thread CPU into a 15-inch laptop, and there's nothing you can do about it. And more than that, well, it actually happened, and there it is, and it's remarkable. But that's all from me for now, which means it's time. Time to press the like button. Time to subscribe to the Digital Foundry YouTube channel if you haven't already. And yes, if you have, there's no excuse whatsoever not to ring the bell for instant notifications whenever we post new content. Unless, of course, you don't want instant notifications. The Digital Foundry Patreon, that's there for those that love what we do and want to support the team more directly in putting together content like this. But that's all from me for now. Thanks for watching, hopefully enjoying, and yes, making it all the way to the end, if indeed you did. But that's it, that's the video, and I thank you for watching it.